The Nexus 7 debris field stretched across 17,000 cubic kilometers of twisted metal and crystallized plasma, a monument to whatever spectacular argument had taken place here roughly 3 millennia ago. Nobody remembered who had been killing whom. Typical galactic politics. But everybody remembered that dead civilizations left excellent salvage opportunities, which explained why the Kythera had arrived first, naturally. The crystalline beings hummed in perfect harmony as they worked, their prismatic bodies refracting the system's pale star into rainbow cascades across their pristine extraction vessels. To hear them tell it, they weren't salvaging at all. They were conducting archaeological preservation for the betterment of galactic cultural heritage. The fact that they sold 90% of their findings to weapons manufacturers was, presumably, also for cultural heritage. "Eloquent as always," muttered Captain Vex through the comm static, watching the Kythera's ballet from his own considerably less elegant vessel. The Wayward Sun looked like what would happen if a garbage scow had reproduced with a military frigate and then been raised by particularly unimaginative engineers. But it flew, it had decent sensors, and nobody expected much from human salvagers anyway. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, announced his navigator, a cheerful pessimist named Chen, who had the unsettling habit of being right about everything. "Vorthak swarm, looks like a full extraction fleet." "Wonderful." Vex leaned back in his captain's chair, which squeaked in protest. The Vorthak approached salvage the way they approached everything else, with overwhelming numbers and the social finesse of a planetary bombardment. Their ships moved in perfect synchronization, black geometric forms that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The lead Vorthak vessel opened a channel, broadcasting the collective voice of approximately 40,000 individual minds speaking as one. "Kythera Extraction Team. Withdraw to minimum safe distance. Vorthak Collective claims salvage rights by right of superior force projection." "How refreshingly direct," came the crystalline response from the Kythera flagship. "Unfortunately, we filed the appropriate documentation with the Galactic Salvage Authority approximately 6 standard hours ago. We have legal precedence." "Legal precedence is irrelevant when faced with particle beam arrays." "Ah, the eternal philosophical debate. Bureaucracy versus firepower." Vex grinned. This was exactly why he loved salvage work. Two of the galaxy's most self-important species, about to have a very expensive disagreement over who got to claim the moral high ground while strip mining a graveyard. Meanwhile, his small human crew could slip in, grab whatever the big players overlooked, and disappear before anyone noticed. "Captain," Chen said, "long-range sensors are picking up something interesting. Grid reference 77 Alpha, buried about 50 meters inside that dreadnought wreck." "Define interesting." "Biosignatures, faint but definitely organic. And the energy readings." Chen frowned at his console. "This doesn't match any known technology in the databases." Unknown technology in salvage work usually meant one of 3 things: worthless alien art, weapons that would explode if you looked at them wrong, or occasionally, if you were very lucky and very stupid, something that would revolutionize galactic civilization. The odds were roughly 80%, 19%, and 1%, respectively. "Plot a course," Vex decided, quietly. The Wayward Sun drifted through the debris field like a particularly lazy asteroid, using the wreckage as cover while the Kythera and Vorthak continued their polite territorial dispute. Vex's crew consisted of 5 humans, which by galactic standards qualified as either brave or insane. Most species traveled in groups of hundreds or thousands. Humans, with their typical disregard for statistical probability, seemed perfectly content to wander the universe in tiny clusters, held together by nothing more than shared stubbornness and bad jokes. "There," Chen announced. Visual confirmation. The object was definitely artificial. A smooth, organic-looking pod about the size of a shuttlecraft, embedded in the hull of what had once been a massive warship. Its surface was dark, almost black, but with an oily iridescence that suggested it was far from inert. Life signs are stronger now, reported their xenobiologist, an enthusiastic young woman named Kai, who collected alien tissue samples the way other people collected stamps. Whatever's in there, it's definitely alive. And big. How big? Adult humanoid, maybe slightly larger, but Captain ... Kai's voice carried that particular note of scientific excitement that usually preceded very expensive mistakes. The genetic patterns I'm reading don't match anything in the galactic database. This isn't just unknown technology, it's an unknown species. That changed the mathematics considerably. Unknown species were either extinct, which made them archaeologically priceless, or they were unknown for very good reasons, which made them extremely dangerous. Sometimes both. The comm crackled with an incoming transmission from the Kythera. Human vessel, you are operating within our designated salvage zone. Please withdraw immediately. Actually, Vex replied, according to Galactic Salvage Code, subsection 47, biological discoveries supersede territorial claims pending xenobiological assessment. You cannot be serious. Deadly serious. We're declaring this a potential first contact scenario. The Vorthak collective voice cut through the channel. First contact protocols are irrelevant. Unknown biological entities represent potential contamination vectors. Standard procedure requires immediate sterilization. Standard procedure, Vex said, requires a xenobiology team to make that determination. Congratulations, you're looking at one. Chen shot him a look. Their xenobiology team consisted of one graduate student with a portable scanner and an unhealthy fascination with things that could kill her. Captain, Kai whispered, staring at her readings. The pod's internal temperature is rising. I think it's waking up. Through the view screen, they watched hairline cracks appear across the pod's surface. Whatever had been sleeping inside for the past 3,000 years was apparently tired of sleeping. All ships, withdraw immediately, commanded the Vorthak collective. We are detecting pod breach. Lethal force is authorized. Now hold on, Vex began, but his words were cut off by a sound that no human had ever heard before, transmitted through the comm channels with crystal clarity. It was something between a roar and a song, beautiful and terrible, the voice of a creature that had never learned to fear anything in the universe. The pod cracked open like an egg, spilling pale light into the surrounding wreckage. And something that had been waiting 3 millennia to see the stars again finally opened its eyes. What emerged from the pod was not, strictly speaking, what anyone had expected. For starters, it was considerably smaller than the readings had suggested, roughly the size of a human adolescent, though built along entirely different architectural principles. 4 arms, 2 legs, a torso that seemed designed by someone who had heard vague descriptions of vertebrate anatomy and decided to improvise. Its skin was translucent pearl, shot through with veins of bioluminescent gold that pulsed in complex patterns. Most unsettling of all, it had far too many eyes. Not just the 2 large primary ones, but dozens of smaller optical clusters scattered across its skull and shoulders like living jewels, and it was quite obviously terrified. By the 7 crystals, breathed the Kythera commander. It's a juvenile. The creature, for lack of a better term, had pressed itself against the interior of the cracked pod, all of its many eyes darting frantically between the assembled ships. It made a series of soft, musical sounds that might have been attempts at communication, or possibly just distress calls. Irrelevant, declared the Vorthak collective, though there was a new note in their harmonized voice that might have been uncertainty. Threat assessment remains unchanged. Recommend immediate elimination. You want to murder a child? Kai's voice cut across the comm with enough indignation to power a small space station. We want to eliminate a potential extinction-level biological hazard, the collective corrected. Age is irrelevant to lethality. Captain Vex found himself in the peculiar position of watching two advanced galactic civilizations debate the ethics of infanticide, while a clearly frightened alien toddler cowered in a broken pod. It was exactly the sort of situation that made him grateful for humanity's well-documented inability to take anything seriously. Chen, he said quietly, please tell me you're recording this conversation for posterity. Already on it, Captain. Future xenoanthropologists are going to love this. The Kythera had apparently decided to approach the situation with their trademark diplomatic finesse. Their flagship began broadcasting what could generously be called music, crystalline harmonies that resonated through subspace in mathematically perfect intervals. The young creature tilted its head, listening. Then, to everyone's surprise, it began to sing back. Its voice was nothing like the Kythera's precise tones, wild and organic, full of micro-variations and emotional undertones that no artificial intelligence could have programmed. It was the difference between a metronome and a heartbeat. Fascinating, murmured the Kythera commander. It's attempting harmonic communication. The linguistic patterns suggest advanced cognitive development despite apparent juvenile status. It's scared, Kai said flatly. Look at the bioluminescent patterns. Those aren't communication attempts. They're stress responses. And you base this assessment on what, exactly? Inquired the Vorthak. 3 years of xenobiological study, 2 years of field research, and the fact that I'm not a collective of warmongering insects who see everything through a tactical lens. Personal insults are unnecessary and ineffective. Were they? Because you seem pretty insulted. Vex grinned. He'd recruited Kai specifically because she had the rare ability to irritate multiple species simultaneously while remaining technically professional. It was a gift. The creature had finished its song and was now peering curiously at the human ship. It seemed to have identified the wayward sun as the least threatening presence in the area, which, given that their main weapons array was currently held together with molecular tape and wishful thinking, was probably accurate. Captain, Chen reported, it's moving. The juvenile had extracted itself from the pod with surprising grace, despite having clearly never used its limbs in zero gravity. It pushed off from the wreckage and began drifting toward them, using its 4 arms to navigate through the debris field with instinctive skill. All ships, maintain distance, ordered the Vorthak. Do not allow the entity to achieve contact. Or what? Vex asked. You'll shoot a lost kid for trying to make friends? If necessary. The creature reached the hull of the wayward sun and pressed itself against the view screen, all of its eyes focusing on the human crew with unmistakable curiosity. Up close, its features were even more remarkable. Delicate bone structure visible through translucent skin, the golden light patterns shifting with what could only be described as emotions. It's beautiful, Kai whispered. It's an apex, said the Vorthak collective, and for the first time, their unified voice carried something that might have been fear. Vex felt a chill run down his spine. Apex? As in the apex predators? Correct. Genetic analysis confirms 97% probability. This entity belongs to the species that dominated galactic civilization for approximately 4,000 years before their unexplained disappearance. They didn't disappear, the Kythera commander said quietly. They were exterminated by a coalition of species who decided that coexistence was impossible. The creature outside their window made another soft sound, pressing one of its hands against the hull. Through the metal and ceramic composite, Vex could swear he felt something. Not physically, but deeper. a presence, gentle and questioning. "Well," he said finally, "this just got interesting." "This just got lethal," corrected the Vorthak. Apex juveniles imprint on the first sentient beings they encounter. If it bonds with your crew, it will become exponentially more dangerous as it matures. How dangerous are we talking? Adult Apex were capable of single-handedly destroying entire star systems, the Kythera commander said. Not through technology, but through biological manipulation of stellar matter. They could command gravity, manipulate atomic structures, reshape matter at the molecular level. One Apex adult was equivalent to a fleet of dreadnoughts. Vex looked at the creature again. Small, frightened, alone in the vast darkness of space, and tried to imagine it as a cosmic force of destruction. "Yeah," he said, "I'm not seeing it." "That," said the Vorthak, powering up their weapons arrays, "is precisely the problem with human pattern recognition." The juvenile Apex, apparently sensing the shift in mood, began to glow brighter. Its song changed pitch, becoming something that bypassed the ears entirely and resonated directly in the bones. Around the debris field, dead metal began to sing in harmony. And every ship present suddenly realized they were no longer dealing with a lost child. They were dealing with something that could turn their vessels into musical instruments if it chose to. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that preceded either diplomatic breakthroughs or spectacular violence. In this case, given the galaxy's track record, smart money was on violence. "Weapons targeting both the entity and the human vessel," announced the Vorthak, because subtlety had apparently died along with the Apex civilization. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw from contact." "Counter-proposal," Vex replied, making no move to back away from the creature still pressed against his view screen. "How about you all take a deep breath, or whatever your species does for stress management, and consider that maybe, just maybe, your ancestors might have made a mistake." "Our ancestors," the Kythera commander said with crystalline precision, "prevented galactic extinction." "Your ancestors committed galactic genocide," Kai snapped. "There's a difference. The Apex were not a civilization," the Vorthak Collective stated. "They were a plague, individual entities capable of rewriting the laws of physics on a whim. No government could control them, no military could contain them, no diplomacy could reason with them." "Because you never tried reasoning," Chen interjected, his fingers dancing across his console as he pulled up historical archives. "I've been reviewing the data. Every first contact scenario with Apex individuals ended in immediate military engagement. Because they were inherently hostile." "No," Vex said, watching the juvenile Apex trace patterns on his hull with one delicate finger. "Because you were inherently terrified." The creature had begun to emit a low harmonic frequency that resonated through the ship's superstructure. It wasn't destructive, more like a cat's purr translated into quantum mechanics. Around them, the debris field continued its eerie metal symphony, ancient weapons and shattered hulls vibrating in perfect harmony. 15 seconds, warned the Vorthak. "You know what I find fascinating?" Vex continued, settling back in his squeaky chair. 3,000 years ago, you managed to wipe out an entire species of beings who could manipulate matter at the subatomic level. Beings who, according to your own records, never actually attacked anyone, just existed in a way that made you uncomfortable. "They were unpredictable," the Kythera commander argued. "Chaos entities. They altered stellar formations for entertainment, created pocket dimensions as art projects, treated the fundamental forces of reality like toys. So basically, they were teenagers with superpowers." "Exactly. Which made them..." "Misunderstood?" Kai suggested sweetly. 10 seconds. The juvenile Apex had apparently grown bored with hull tracing and was now attempting to communicate through interpretive dance, if interpretive dance involved 4 arms and localized gravity manipulation. It was either deeply meaningful artistic expression or the galactic equivalent of finger painting. "Captain," Chen said quietly, "I've been running psychological profiles on Apex behavior patterns. Want to know what I found?" "Enlighten us." They were pack hunters, but not in the way anyone assumed. They didn't hunt other species. They hunted problems. Cosmic anomalies, stellar instabilities, rogue black holes. They were cosmic janitors with God mode enabled. 5 seconds. And the reason they disappeared periodically from galactic records? They were sleeping. Long hibernation cycles to let the universe settle down between cleaning sessions, like cosmic maintenance workers on the night shift. 3 seconds. "Which means," Vex concluded, standing up and walking to the view screen where the juvenile watched him with dozens of curious eyes, "this little one has been sleeping for 3,000 years and just woke up to find its entire species extinct." 2 seconds. "And you want to finish the job?" 1 second. Vex placed his hand on the inside of the view screen, directly opposite the creature's translucent palm. The moment their hands aligned, separated only by reinforced polymer, the singing stopped. Everything stopped. The debris field hung motionless in space. The Vorthak weapons arrays powered down involuntarily. The Kythera harmonic generators fell silent. Even the system's star seemed to pause in its burning, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "Zero," whispered the Vorthak collective, but nothing happened. The juvenile apex tilted its head and made a sound like crystal wind chimes caught in a summer breeze. Around them, the debris field began to move, not violently, not destructively, but with purpose. Twisted metal straightened, shattered hulls realigned, crystallized plasma reformed into elegant geometric patterns. It wasn't repairing the wreckage, it was turning it into something beautiful. "By all the harmonies," breathed the Kythera commander, It's making art." "It's demonstrating power," the Vorthak corrected, though their collective voice had lost its certainty. "This is a threat display." "No," Kai said, her scanner practically vibrating with excitement. "Look at the quantum signatures. It's not threatening us. It's trying to show us what its species used to do. They weren't destroyers. They were gardeners." The transformed debris field now resembled a vast sculpture, beautiful and impossible, stretching across thousands of kilometers of space. At its heart, the juvenile apex floated like a living jewel, all of its eyes focused on the human ship with something that could only be described as hope. "Weapon systems are non-responsive," reported the Vorthak. "The entity has disabled our offensive capabilities." "Not disabled," Vex realized. "Improved. Check your targeting computers." A pause. Then, grudgingly, "Accuracy has increased by 400%. Weapon efficiency has improved by 600%. Power consumption has decreased by 80%. "It's not trying to hurt you," Vex said. "It's trying to help you build better tools." "This changes nothing," the Kythera commander declared, though there was a note of uncertainty in their crystalline voice. "Apex entities remain fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. They must be contained or eliminated." "Even if they're the last one?" "Especially because it's the last one. Allow it to mature, allow it to reproduce, and in 1,000 years we'll face the same existential crisis our ancestors did." The juvenile apex pressed closer to the view screen, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to something that looked almost like pleading? "You know what's really funny about this whole situation?" Vex asked, not moving his hand from the glass. "You're also afraid of a species that could rewrite reality. You've forgotten the most important question. Which is, if they were really that dangerous, why didn't they rewrite you out of existence the moment you became a threat?" The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the silence before violence. This was the silence before terrible understanding. Perhaps, the Kythera commander said slowly, because they chose not to. Because they were better than us, Kai added quietly. The juvenile apex began to sing again, soft and questioning. Through the transformed debris field, its voice carried like light through crystal, beautiful and alien and utterly without malice, and every species present had to confront the possibility that they were about to repeat the greatest mistake in galactic history. "Final offer?" Vex said, still watching the creature's many eyes. "Stand down. Let us take custody of the kid, and maybe, just maybe, we can figure out how to do this right the second time around." "And if we refuse?" Vex smiled. "Then you'll have to explain to your grandchildren why you murdered the last living artwork in the universe." What happened next would have been hilarious if it weren't so tragically predictable. The Kythera and Vorthak did what advanced civilizations had been doing for millennia when faced with moral complexity. They formed a committee. "We propose a compromise," the Kythera commander announced after precisely 47 seconds of internal deliberation. "Transfer the entity to our research facilities. We can study its capabilities in a controlled environment, determine safe interaction parameters, and develop appropriate containment protocols." "Containment protocols," Kai repeated slowly. "For a child. For an unprecedented biological phenomenon with reality-altering capabilities," the collective corrected. "You mean a kid with superpowers who just wants to make friends?" The distinction is irrelevant. And there it was, the fundamental philosophical divide that had been tearing the galaxy apart since before humans had figured out fire. On one side, species who saw everything through the lens of risk management and threat assessment. On the other, a small blue planet's worth of primates who had somehow convinced themselves that the most dangerous approach to danger was being afraid of it. Vex made his decision with the same careful consideration he applied to most of life's important choices. None whatsoever. "Chen, bring us alongside the entity. Kai, prep the auxiliary bay for a guest." "Captain," the Vorthak collective said with ominous finality, "if you proceed with this course of action, we will be forced to consider you a contaminated asset requiring sterilization." "Noted." Vex began cycling through the Wayward Son's external speakers. "Kid, you want to come aboard?" The juvenile apex responded by dissolving. Not dying. Dissolving. Its translucent form became temporarily incorporeal, flowing through the ship's hull like liquid light. Alarms blared briefly before falling silent as the creature's passage actually improved the molecular cohesion of the materials it passed. "Through." "Well," Chen observed as their unexpected passenger materialized in the center of the bridge. "That's new." The apex juvenile stood, floated, really, in a sphere of its own localized atmosphere, looking around at the human crew with the sort of wide-eyed wonder that suggested it had never seen anything quite so fascinatingly primitive. It made a soft trilling sound and extended one of its 4 arms toward Kai, who, naturally, reached out to shake hands with a being that could theoretically unmake her on a molecular level. The moment their fingers touched, the bridge filled with images. Not visual projections, but direct neural impressions that bypassed the optical system entirely. Memories, perhaps, or dreams. Cities that floated through space like living things. Gardens that grew between stars. Beings of light and music tending to the fundamental forces of reality with the patient care of cosmic gardeners. And then, darkness. Fear. The coalition fleets arriving with weapons that could crack planets. The desperate evacuation to hibernation pods. The last songs of a dying civilization echoing through folded space. The images faded, leaving the humans blinking in the harsh light of their utilitarian bridge. They were beautiful, Kai whispered, tears streaming down her face. The juvenile apex tilted its head and made a questioning sound. Then, apparently deciding that Kai needed comforting, it began to glow with soft, warm light that somehow made everything feel safer. Touching, observed the Vorthak. Now surrender the entity or face the consequences of harboring a galactic threat. Counter-proposal, Vex said, settling into his chair one last time. Go away. This is your final warning. Yeah? Well, this is mine. He opened a channel to every ship in the system. My name is Captain Rex Vex of the independent salvage vessel Wayward Sun. I'm a human being, which means I come from a species that survived ice ages, nuclear weapons, reality television, and social media. We are professionally stubborn and institutionally incapable of making sensible decisions when someone tells us what we can't do. The juvenile apex listened with obvious fascination, its bioluminescent patterns shifting in what might have been amusement. This creature is a child, a frightened, lonely child who just spent 3,000 years sleeping alone in the dark and woke up to find that everyone it ever knew is dead. And your solution, the brilliant strategy of two of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, is to murder it for being different. It's not different, the Kythera commander protested. It's dangerous. So are we. So is everyone, if you give them enough reason. But here's the thing about humans. We spent most of our evolutionary history being hunted by things bigger, stronger, and better armed than us. We learned that the best way to survive predators isn't to become predators ourselves. It's to become something predators don't want to hunt. The juvenile apex drifted closer to Vex, all of its many eyes focused on him with something like recognition. We became friends with wolves. We domesticated aurochs. We taught bears to ride bicycles. We looked at every dangerous thing in our environment and asked the same question. How do we turn this into a pet? That's the most scientifically irresponsible approach to xenobiology I've ever heard, Kai said admiringly. It's also the most successful. Humans have been adopting dangerous things for 50,000 years. We're good at it. The apex juvenile reached out and gently touched Vex's shoulder. Where its fingers made contact, the captain's worn uniform began to shimmer with threads of living light, not changing the fabric but improving it, making it stronger and more comfortable and somehow exactly what it had always been meant to be. You see, Vex said, it's not trying to hurt anyone. It's trying to help. That's what Apex do. They make things better. Until they don't, the Vorthak Collective stated. Until they decide your species is an inefficient use of stellar matter and optimize you out of existence. Has it occurred to you, Chen interjected, that maybe they never did that? Maybe the reason the galaxy is full of species who were afraid of the Apex is because the Apex only helped people who weren't afraid of them? Another pause. Another terrible moment of understanding. You're suggesting, the Kythera commander said slowly, that our ancestors destroyed the Apex not because they were threatening us, but because we were threatening them? I'm suggesting, Vex replied, that fear makes monsters out of everybody, including us. The juvenile Apex began to sing again, not the complex harmonies it had used before, but something simpler. A lullaby, perhaps, or just a song of contentment. Around the bridge, the ship's systems began to run more smoothly, more efficiently, as if the creature's presence was somehow optimizing everything it touched. The choice is yours, Vex concluded. You can repeat history, or you can help us write a better ending. The silence stretched for long minutes. Then, finally, the Kythera commander spoke. We will observe from a safe distance. And if the entity proves hostile, then we'll deal with that when it happens, if it happens. The Vorthak Collective made a sound like grinding gears. This decision violates approximately 400 safety protocols. Most of the best decisions do, Vex said. As the alien fleets withdrew to what they considered minimum safe distances, the juvenile apex curled up in the center of the bridge like a cat made of starlight. Its breathing, if that's what the rhythmic pulsing of its bioluminescent patterns could be called, gradually synchronized with the ship's life support systems. "So," Kai said, settling down beside their new passenger, "what do we call you?" The creature considered this question seriously, then made a sound like silver bells mixed with summer rain. When the humans looked confused, it tried again. A different sound, softer and somehow more familiar. "I think," Chen said wonderfully, "it just said, 'friend.'" And in the end, that was exactly what the galaxy needed most. Not another predator, not another threat to be contained or eliminated, but simply a friend. Someone to help make the music a little more beautiful, the gardens a little more alive, and the vast loneliness of space a little less empty. It would take time, of course. The Kythera would need months to adjust their xenobiological protocols. The Vorthak would require years to reprogram their threat assessment matrices. Other species would need to be convinced, one first contact at a time, that some creatures were worth saving rather than fearing. But humans, as always, were perfectly content to start with what they had. A small ship, a stubborn crew, and one very special passenger who thought the universe was worth taking care of. After all, they'd been adopting strays for millennia. What was one more